Can we get some real journalism in here?
Hilarious to see these millionaire media pundits on TV clutch.
Oh, by the way, if you're wondering why you're seeing like Hassan more outwardly attacking Trump on his Twitter now, it's because he's super desperately going for this mainstream liberal rebrand where he's trying to just present himself as kind of like a liberal instead of a far lefty dude who now is adamantly opposed to Trump and wants to help the Democrats and work with the Democratic Party and shit. In case you're wondering why those messages are happening.
Hilarious to see these millionaire media pundits on TV clutching their pearls about someone standing a murderer when this is the United States of America, as if we don't lionize criminals, as if we don't have, you know, we don't stand murderers of all sorts, and we give them Netflix shows.
Wow.
There's a huge disconnect between the narratives and angles that sort of mainstream media pushes and what the American public feels. And you see that in moments like this. And I can tell you, I saw the biggest audience growth that I've ever seen because people were like, oh, some journalist is actually speaking to the anger that we feel.
The women who gather outside court in New York.
So you're going to see women especially that feel like, oh my God, right? Like here's this man who's revolutionary, who's famous, who's handsome, who's young, who's smart. He's a person that seems this morally good man.
So morally good.
Yeah, I just realized women will literally date an assassin before they swipe right on me. That's where we are. I'm sure you wouldn't like to be compared to a Trump supporter, but some of how people cannot understand why people have sympathies for Mangione strikes me as the same as a lot of media not understanding why people support Trump.
I totally agree.
It's because a lot of people are just really, really desperate.
They want somebody to take on the system. Wow. They want somebody to tear down these barbaric establishment institutions.
Bro. Wow. So brave.
Cruz Barrios says the agents did not give a warrant to her mother, so she refused to get out. That's when they broke the window and unlocked the car.
No! I would understand.
It's wild. Like, this is just totally illegal. Gestapo. Supreme Court says Trump administration must facilitate return of Maryland man mistakenly deported to El Salvador. And no, this is not the Supreme Court going woke, Chad. This is the Supreme Court saying this is our limit. Our limit is when you violate a previous court order and erroneously, without due process, send someone to El Salvador. You cannot turn around and claim as though you have no mechanism of bringing them back. I mean, this is important. This is important because this is like either a constitutional crisis or the Trump administration takes the L. If the SCOTUS went along with this, this would mean that like the judiciary is gone. There's no power to the judiciary at all, and we'll see what happens. What happens if they don't agree to this? This is the interesting part of the story. I don't know. I feel like last time something similar to this happened, we had a war. So yeah, we shall see. Basically, I don't know. Maybe I am not up to date on my constitutional law and also Supreme Court history, but I can't think of a time where a constitutional crisis was triggered against the state rather than other states, like against the federal government. I kind of want to watch this legal video. What happens when he ignores court orders? This is precisely the case that may happen.
Lawyers live by one ironclad rule. When the judge tells us to do something, we do it. That doesn't mean we always like it, and it doesn't mean we won't try to find other arguments to achieve the same ends. We're kind of like teenagers in that way. But at the end of the day, we roll our eyes privately and comply with what the judge tells us to do. But it seems we may have the clearest case of the executive defying a direct court order in American history. And it looks like things are only going to get worse. The Alien Enemies Act of 1789 is a controversial law that purports to allow the government to deport foreign nationals during wartime.
Okay. We don't need to watch this on Watch a Video.
There's a bit of a darkness that has to be incorporated into men before they can mature, before they can stop being children. And it's actually better to be a bit of a monster than a complete bloody lamb. Why don't you give some thought to trying to figure out why young men and women are so isolated from one another now that they don't eat?
Do you think corporations are corrupt? What advice do you give to those who want to get rid of those corrupt corporations? I'm going to give you the same boring answer I always give you. Corporations are not corrupt. Corporations just do things in the interest of corporations. Same thing, employees do things in the interest of employees. Everybody acts in their own interests. The idea is to create some rule of regulations that discourages people from acting in ways that are harmful to society, and then some kind of enforcement body that can catch them when they're breaking those rules.
Trying to figure out why young men and women are so isolated from one another now that they don't even date. They don't drive. They don't drink. They don't marry. Why is that?
Why is that?
About 60 years of radically demoralizing, quasi-feminist, dimwit, hedonistic, leftist propaganda shoveled at them.
Jeez.
We might as well teach kids using a Netflix series on adolescence.
Look at me now!
Jesus.
My God.
Brutal, pathetic.
Oh.
And of course, they're going to turn to figures like Andrew Tate in their desperation.
I've got to say, I've interviewed you many times. I think
My
this has
God.
been our best interview. And the fact it moves you so much, to me, says it all. If you didn't genuinely
Sorry.
care,
I'm sorry.
you wouldn't get emotional talking about this.
Man.
Oh,
just
this is a cry
seeing
one, isn't
this,
it?
like, it's malaise. It's
Oh,
also
yeah.
overwhelming.
Sorry.
Well, many evangelists for common sense cheer the demise of Justin Woke Trudeau. His resignation as Canadian Prime Minister marked the end of a disastrous period of his ultra-virtue signalling policies and cratering polls. Conservative Pierre Poilievre seemed almost certain of a landslide victory in the imminent election, but tariffs and talk of a 51st state have changed everything. And the Liberals have changed their leader. Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor, is now a favourite to be Canada's next Prime Minister at the election, and one prominent Canadian star of the uncensored universe thinks that spells disaster, not just for Canada, but for us all. Dr. Jordan Peterson, author of the best-selling We Who Wrestle with God, and co-founder of the Peterson Academy, rejoins me
The
now.
Peterson
Jordan, great to see you
Academy?
again.
I can finally go get my
Hey,
degree.
Piers, nice to see you.
Hi, Piers.
For those who haven't kept up with what's happening in Canada, just very quickly bring us up to speed, because it seemed a few months ago
Oh, no.
that Trudeau was going, and there was no way in God's
It's
hell's chance
horrible
of
out
the
here.
Liberals winning the next election.
You're not going to believe it, Piers.
In a few weeks because
no.
of the damage that Trudeau had done. But there's been a political change driven mainly, I think, from what's been happening in America.
Yeah, well, it's two factors, I would say. I mean, it's certainly the case that Canadians had decided after 10 years of Trudeau and absolutely dismal economic performance and an increasingly fractious and uncertain country, that the sunny days globalist liberals had had their run and deserved to be annihilated. And that's exactly what was going to happen.
He's so
They were
ass-pain.
facing an electoral defeat so profound that they might have lost their official party status.
Wow.
And that was
Official
necessary.
party status gone.
The West is divided against the East because of the West's dependence on fossil fuel, while the whole Canadian economy's dependence on fossil fuel, and the green liberals' insistence that that can't proceed, and
call
that
them
somehow
greenies.
some new magical economy is going to emerge that will make everyone twice as rich, and the air is stellar and clean. And well, and then two things happened. Trudeau
Coal.
resigned, and Trump started his saber rattling in the United States, particularly in relationship to Canada, although not uniquely. And Canadians have often
Been a
united
retard.
in the face
Oh, no.
of American expansionism. It's a historical trend, and it's also the case that Canadians have a proclivity to pride themselves on being morally superior to the United States, and any excuse is good enough to go down that road. And then the Liberals, also being relatively instrumental in canny, decided that they would install a new leader, coronate him.
Oh, he's got to hate this Canny guy, because the Canny guy seems so smart. He must fucking hate him, dude. Oh, no.
Now we have a prime minister who's only been selected by about 130,000 Canadians. And
Uh-oh.
the real
Not democratic.
issue here is, Piers, I think that older Canadians who are likely to prefer Carney believe that he's a return to the stability, let's say, of the period between, well, even the post-war period, but particularly between 1990 and 2010. You know, Carney's a banker. Canadians think he's pro-free market. They think that he's pro-industry. They think
couldn't
that
be
he's
more
a
wrong.
genuine, old-style, stable, conservative liberal
He's
type.
a woke tard, though.
And he looks the part, and he plays that, and that's how he puts himself forward. But
He's a
the problem
woke tard.
with that, sir, is that Carney is seriously bad news.
Bad news.
Despite his
Bad news
international
bears.
cachet and his lengthy CV and his term as Bank of England governor, that's all impressed Canadians and made them believe on the face of his CV that he's a competent person. But
let me tell
a
you,
little bit of investigation into what he believes and the scope of the oncoming disaster makes itself clear. I mean, Carney believes that 75% of the world's fossil fuels have to remain in the ground. He believes that
What an
every
idiot.
single financial decision that every individual makes and every company should prioritize decarbonization over every other consideration.
Unbelievable.
He was UN climate envoy, and he started a consortium of businesses that agreed really to be under the aegis of central planning because he believes the climate apocalypse narrative. And
What an
my
idiot.
sense is that that entire narrative, and I mean entire, is nothing but the use of provocative and ill-founded
And
fear
Marxist stuff.
to exercise a level of control over
Please say,
people that,
can we get some
well, we'll
Marxism
find
in here?
unimaginable if it ever manages to manifest itself. And it's economically devastating. I mean, your country's been devastated by the net zero idiocy, and one glance
sure.
at Germany should convince anyone that that's a
Germany.
really bad path to walk down.
Wow.
So Canadians are looking for security. They think that Carney's a 1990s guy like leaders
not.
that we have had before. And they really don't, they haven't done the investigative work necessary to
They're retards.
actually understand
Canadians
who
are
this guy
stupid.
is.
What are you going to do?
So, Jordan, like I said at the start, the big issue, it seems to me, in terms of why Carney's getting more popular and why Poilievre is not.
You better not blame
is
Trump.
because
Don't
of
do
what's
it.
happening in America, and in particular, Donald Trump basically taking on Canada in a very aggressive way that many people think is completely ill-suited.
How dare.
To the fact that Canada's always been a supportive neighbour. Just on that point, what do you think of what Trump has been saying about Canada in the last few weeks?
How
Well,
dare he
it seems like
blame
it's
Trump?
part of whatever his broader strategy is on the tariff side, but it couldn't have possibly been more ill-timed from a Canadian perspective because, as you pointed out in your introduction, the Trudeau Liberals were headed for utter catastrophe, which was a fate they richly deserved. And now Canadians have united, and at least to some degree, and actually have started to understand, and maybe this is a salutary consequence of Trump's saber rattling, that maybe they have a country worth protecting, and that maybe our absolute
good.
dependence on the United States, which we've really fallen into, let's say in the last 30 years in particular, was a strategic error because it left us with no cards on the table. But at the same time, what's happened is that Canadians have decided that because of how Mark Carney presents himself and because of his CV, his record, such as it is, that he's really the guy to deal with Trump. Now, Trump has already said publicly that he'd rather deal with a weak liberal than a strong conservative, speaking from his pro-American stance. But Canadians really haven't taken that to heart. You know,
Why does Jordan look like a tomato? Because the liberals poison his appearance on these networks, just like they do with Trump, to make him seem more orange, okay? Don't believe the hype.
you can't overestimate the utility of looking the part. And Carney really is a master at that. And the Liberals, the Canadian Liberals, are a treacherous bunch. And they will say anything to get elected. Like, I mean, Carney has convinced Canadians that he's going to put together an effective industrial policy. And this is something that I just can't understand. Like,
This
I
guy's
read
fucking
his
retarded.
book, Values, twice.
Yeah, wow.
I really tried to understand it. And there isn't anything that Carney believes more deeply than that carbon dioxide is going to destroy the world. He staked his entire soul on that proposition. And now he's telling Canadians that he's going to be the leader to turn us back into an industrial dynamo, which is kind of a 1970s vision anyways. And Canadians are desperate to believe that. And then the Liberals have been extremely canny in leveraging that anti-American sentiment. And the Americans, insofar as they care about Canada, have been extremely blind and foolish in relationship to the consequences of their utterances. Like, I've used my connection network to find out what the hell is going on behind the scenes in DC. And
What the
it's
hell is
pretty
going on?
clear that the demolition of the Canadian Conservatives is an unintended consequence of Trump's broader strategy. And so if he would have just held off for a couple of months,
God
and
damn it.
you know, that's obviously his decision,
Darn
then
Trump.
he would have had a much more stable, reliable, productive, and intelligent country to the north. And now I'm not only afraid that Carney will win, Piers, and the polls, especially Polymarket, seem to indicate that at the moment. I don't actually believe that the country will stay intact with another 48 years of Liberal governance.
It's all over.
I think the West will I think the west of Canada will decide that it's had enough. And certainly the Premier of Alberta, which is our oil-rich province, has been very, very forthright in her objection to everything Carney does. And, the minister who was responsible for energy policy under Trudeau was literally a climate activist from the time he was 5.
Unbelievable.
And Carney,
Are you
with his
fucking
emphasis
serious?
on decarbonization, couldn't be a worse enemy of really Canada's fundamental economic engine. And of course, now he's rebranded himself entirely. And as I said, he looks the part. He looks every inch the part, and Canadians would like some stability and to move away from the narcissistic pretender who was our last leader, but they're not going to get what they bargained for.
The IRS is the biggest collection agency in the world, and with April the 15th now fast approaching, it's more aggressive than ever.
Look at the numbers on 333 Canada, or wait, 338 Canada. Are the Liberals still gaining? Oh no. 43% plus or minus 5% margin of error. Seat projection is up to 194 seats. Oh no. Oh no. Rip.
Enforcement is ramped up in 2025, and if you owe back taxes or have unfiled returns, waiting is not an option. The longer you do, the worse it gets. April 15th marks another tax year that has passed you by. The smart move is to get ahead, but never contact the IRS alone. Let the experts at Tax Network USA handle this for you. Why?
Yeah,
well,
why?
Not all tax resolution companies are the same. Tax Network USA has a preferred direct line to the IRS, meaning they know exactly which agents to deal with and which to avoid. Okay. They have proven strategies to settle tax problems in your favor, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million.
Okay.
Tax Network USA's attorneys and negotiators have already resolved over $1 billion in tax debt.
Damn,
you can talk to one of their strategists today. It's free. Stop the threatening letters. Stop looking over your shoulder.
That's crazy.
Protect yourself from property seizures and bank levies. Don't let the IRS control your future. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit
How bad were your taxes this year?
tnusa.com.
They were bad. That's why I tuned into my kick stream to support me there.
.com/Piers. That's Piers. April 15th is upon us. Act now before the IRS does it first. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Piers.
I'm on my way, Piers. Thank you.
This concept that Trump keeps pushing of Canada being the 51st state of the United States.
It's epic.
I mean, I can't think of anything more guaranteed to rile most Canadians against an idea than that they would become a vassal state of the US. I mean, how damaging do you think that has been in making Canadians appreciate the real danger of
Canadians are just stupid. They just didn't get that it was all a meme, man. Come on. It was just a meme, guys.
And this is especially true for older Canadians. There's a huge age divide in voting preference in Canada. And older Canadians who lived in a stellar period of Canadian history when all of our institutions were solid and reliable, looked to Carney to restructure the country, to return the country to its former, I wouldn't say glory.
Say glory.
Because glory isn't a Canadian concept, but productive, peaceful, predictable
Canadians
stability.
don't even know the taste of glory.
That's not so bad.
Idiots.
And we had that for a long time. And older Canadians believe that Carney will bring that back and that he can negotiate effectively with Trump. Younger Canadians aren't fundamentally concerned with Trump. They're fundamentally concerned with the fact that their economic future looks dismal. Like the projections are that Canada will be the worst performing economy in the developing world for the next 40 years. And that's definitely a liberal legacy. Oof. And the fact that we're utterly confused about how we're going to move forward on the basis of the economy that we have, which is not entirely a fossil fuel economy or resource economy, but in large part that means that there's no reason to assume that sunnier ways are coming our way. And young people are really concerned about that. That's their fundamental issue. Housing price acceleration, for example, which has made many Canadians under 40, let's say, despair of ever owning a house in a country that's got nothing but land to spare. And so the younger people aren't concerned about Trump and his saber rattling, but the older people are. And at the moment, that's enough to tilt the election quite heavily in Carney's favor. We're looking at a majority Liberal government at the moment,
Not good, guys.
which is an absolute and utter reversal over the situation,
It's fucked.
even a month and a half ago. And so Trump made a, well, at least from the Canadian perspective, he made a...
Crucial error.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was going to ask you about, because you've been pretty supportive of Donald Trump.
Yeah, that was before he fucked us.
This though, has been a very damaging
Excuse me.
thing, I think, for what you would have preferred to happen in Canada. Looking at Trump's wider tariff war that he's now waging on, it seems, the entire planet, some people, depending who you talk to, some people think, well, obviously this has to be done. It needs a radical new rethink. America's $37 trillion in debt. It's been losing manufacturing hand over fist, wiping out the middle
It's
class.
Carney calling.
and so
Oh,
on.
no. What's the conservative obsession with going back to when things were great? Isn't it all a bit of a memory fallacy? We all have the things being better when we were young, childish. Yeah, I don't know.
I can get the big picture argument Trump has been putting forward, but the way he's going about trying to achieve what he says he wants to achieve is being seen by many as incredibly destructive, almost certainly destined to fail. What do you think of it, Jordan? We've never said anything quite like it, but what do you think of it?
Well,
Yeah, Jordan, tell us. Slurp.
well, we haven't seen anything quite like Trump, and so...
Slurp away.
This
Yes.
is par for the course as far as I'm concerned.
For sure.
My suspicions are
Oh my
that
God,
he's
yes.
doing what he
feels like he
tends
needs
do,
to.
which is to set the cat among the pigeons and see what the consequence is. He's certainly put the world, and not only Canada, the world on notice that
He's based.
things need to shift radically. And my suspicion is that what Trump is doing, I mean,
It's just a bluff.
I read an
Negotiating
interesting
tactic.
article yesterday in Newsweek by Mark Joseph, and he claims, and he's reasonably well informed, that Trump does in fact want to shift the tax burden away from income tax to tariffs. And I don't know enough about economic history to be a judge of that policy. In principle, that worked 100 years ago. Does that mean it'll work again? I have no idea. I don't think income tax is a great strategy for funding a country, and so, but that's a casual and idiotic opinion from someone who isn't informed in such matters. But it's certainly possible that that's part of what Trump is pursuing. Another real possibility is that he's doing his art of the deal work, and he's terrifying everyone into returning to the
Terrifying,
negotiating
get it?
table,
Terrifying.
so that he can make a better deal for the United States, and maybe particularly for the working and middle class that he really does seem to care about. And he's putting everyone on notice that the old order is done and we're going to make some new negotiations. And again, I don't think I'm qualified enough on the political and economic front to judge the suitability of that approach. It certainly seems to have woken up Europe, and that's something to say because Europe's been asleep for a long time. And I can't say that I'm unhappy about that because Europe deserves to be woken up.
Yeah, fuck them.
And
True.
it
Fuck
is
Europe.
the case that the working class and the middle class in the United States has been hollowed out to some substantive degree, and people are unhappy about that. And it's going to take months or years to evaluate this particular strategy. Now, it's part of the art of the deal issue, though, as far as I'm concerned, is that Trump is thumping his chest and saying, we're going to take a new look at things, and I'm going to bloody well make sure that the U.S. comes out on top. That's actually his job, and it's something, by the way, that we have been spectacularly bad at in Canada. Our industrial policy for the last 30 years, particularly the last 10, has been backward looking to a degree that's almost unimaginable. We've got no strategy for dealing with IP or data ownership, even though that's the entire new economy.
Oh, yeah.
And even if we turn back to an intelligent resource policy, that'll still mean that we're stuck in the 1970s.
Yep.
And so, well, that's a lot of complication. But I understand Trump's motivation, and he's certainly taken a radically pro-American stance, which is kind of what you'd want to see from a national leader. Now, I'm not very happy that it was ill-timed from a Canadian perspective,
fucked our
and
whole
the
shit up.
collateral damage is going to be immense. I also think, and I've tried to use my DC contacts to make this known, that the last thing Trump really needs is an international banker with WEF connections, who is the UN Special Climate Envoy and who led 400 international companies down the primrose path to idiot net zero policies, maneuvering behind his back and trying to undo everything Trump's done, and trying to do, say, even on the climate and industry side, behind his back with his international connections.
Yeah.
That was not well thought through. And certainly Pierre Poilievre is the person who's paying the price for that at the moment.
Jeez.
American homeowners are
Man, we're really
risking a
milking these
growing
ads,
real estate
Piers.
scam, which the FBI calls house stealing. This is how it works. Criminals forge your signature on just one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee, and then file it with your local recorder's office. Just like that, your home title is transferred out of your name. Scammers can then take out loans using your equity as collateral, or even sell the property behind your back. You won't even know it's happening until you start getting collection or foreclosure notices. When was the last time you checked your home title? I own a home in the United States, and the answer for me is never until now.
Wow.
That's why I trust Home Title Lock. Their $1 million triple lock protection helps keep your home and equity safe. Here's what you get: immediate 24/7 monitoring of your property, urgent alerts if there are any changes, and if fraud does happen, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title at no additional cost. I've teamed up with Home Title Lock to give you a free title history report so you can find out if you're already a victim and get access to your personal title expert, a $250 value just for signing up. Go to HometitleLock.com and use the promo code Piers, or just click on the link in the description.
There you
Make
go.
sure you check out the $1 million triple lock protection details when you get there. That's HometitleLock.com, promo code Piers, P-I-E-R-S, to get the protection and peace of mind that you deserve.
Thank you, Piers.
How does Pierre Poilievre actually feel about this? Because he looked like he was on a certain pathway to become prime minister, and then bang, through no fault of his own really, and certainly no great work by his opponent, but all because of what's been happening in the US, everything has completely changed. I would imagine he's feeling very...
By the way, even though it's, I don't even know if I should have to say this, but being considerate of the political constraints of people that are your political allies is also part of being a good leader and politician. So Donald Trump doing things that leads to other people getting fucked is a really good example of being a really shitty leader. I'm honest enough to be humble, and maybe there's some other thing that I'm missing here, or maybe it's actually the thing I could be missing is maybe in Canada you guys like have laws that would have to be followed. But imagine if Donald Trump would have come out and said, we're doing all of these tariffs against all of these countries, but for Canada, if that Pierre guy is your next prime minister, I don't think Canada's going to have any tariffs. Like, imagine the impact that might have on the elections, as opposed to this where Trump clearly just doesn't even give a fuck about anything happening in Canada whatsoever, you know?
frustrated, isn't he?
Well, I have had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Poilievre on multiple occasions, and, you know, he never took his victory for granted. One of the things he insisted upon when he was speaking with me was that he was going to campaign continually until the election on the assumption that things could shift radically in a sideways direction, and that his apparent lead was not something he would rely on. And I think he has done that. And he's certainly not happy with what's happened on the Trump side. And that is but I mean, if you're going to be the leader of a country, then you're going to have to deal with the unexpected. And I think he's done
Do you think Canadian Conservatives have good policies that they're promising? I don't know anything about the Canadian political situation, so I wouldn't be able to tell you anything about it.
Incredible job of that. Part of Poilievre's problem, too, is that communication problem, let's say, is that the Canadian legacy media, particularly the Canadian Broadcasting
Always that
Corporation,
goddamn
very
media.
much similar to the BBC, is state-funded. and very much inclined to favor.
Why are you manually harvesting resources of cultivating bacteria in the biochars? Because I don't want to set that up because I don't care. I just want to get off this fucking horrible planet. But my ship got eaten by asteroids, okay, on the way here. So now I have to fix my dumbass bullshit ship, okay, and it needs like 320 of these stupid. Okay, I'm working on it. I'm getting off of this place.
Ever ruling liberals, particularly because Poilievre has threatened, and I think he means it, to defund the CBC, which is an institution that royally deserves being defunded. It's incompetent to the core. But Poilievre is having a hard time communicating with Canadians, especially older Canadians who tend to get their news from the CBC, let's say, and assume that it's reliable like it was 30 years ago.
Idiots.
And so he's facing that as an obstacle as well. And then he's also facing the fact that it's a very deep temptation.
I love how half the obstacles, I guess we just claim the opposite on our end in the United States. Half the obstacles that Jordan Peterson says this guy's facing are just how fucking retarded Canadians are. But I guess I feel the same about MAGA, so.
For Canadians to parade themselves as morally superior to the evil and unpredictable Yankees to the south. And certainly the Liberals have been capitalizing on that and terrifying people about Trump and telling everyone that our relationship with the U.S. is over, which is a preposterous claim in many ways, although Canada definitely needs to differentiate and make more sophisticated its economic structures. I mean, we're far too dependent on the Americans. And Trump is also, in some ways, to give the devil his due, pointing that out to Canadians. And one thing he said, and he said this to other countries
pretending like you think Trump is a
that
devil, but
if
okay,
you can't
dude.
really bring anything to the negotiating table, if you have no real power, then why should we pay any attention to what it is that you are asking for or claiming? And I would also put that absolutely 100% firmly at the feet of the Liberals who are hypothetically likely to rectify this now, because their policies have been, for example, there's no east to west pipelines in Canada to speak of, and that's definitely
crazy,
a liberal.
guys.
That's liberal doing. And Carney says he'll rectify that, but he was the author of those policies to begin with. And the other thing he's done that's so treacherous, like truly treacherous, is to present himself as an outsider. And what he means by that, I suppose, technically, is that he's never been elected, which, is a dangerous thing for an actual prime minister of a country. But he's been a key economic advisor operating both in front of and behind the scenes in Canada for the last decade. And he's a man that's responsible in large part for the policies that have made Trump able to do exactly what he has done to Canada over the last month and a half. If you're so damn daft that you've got no power when you come to the negotiating table,
I can feel it.
Especially when you're dealing with the superpower Americans and, madman deal-making Trump, then it's not surprising that you're going to find yourself at a loss and not holding the appropriate cards. And maybe Canadians have woken up to that to some degree, but they're definitely turning to the wrong man to solve the problem. So what's Poilievre is attempting to put forward his pro-working class policies, and he's very popular among young Canadians who should have a say in their future, but the saber rattling by the Americans has definitely worked to a staggering degree in favor of Mark Carney and the Liberals. And Canadians are deluded enough to think that he's a new guy.
Dumbass Canadians, bro. They're so stupid.
He's the worst of the old.
The worst.
Sure.
He's the worst. You tell her.
The interesting thing about America at the moment is it's run by two people in terms of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who I would imagine from a psychoanalysis point of view would be just about as fascinating a subject as you could possibly get. We've talked about Trump, but what do you make of Elon Musk and the whole Doge thing, but also the vicious reaction from the woke left, who of course originally had him as their green energy savior?
Yeah, what happened there? Tell us, Peterson. Give us something insightful.
It wouldn't surprise me in the least if half the money that the American government spent, the Canadian government as well, the British government, governments as such, is like utter waste. And worse than that, like positively counterproductive.
True.
And it's certainly the case that Musk is the kind of managerial businessman who's very detail-oriented. He's an
Oh, yeah.
engineer.
Oh, my God,
Engineers
engineer.
know how things work from the atoms upward. I have many engineers.
From the atoms upward, yes. From the atoms up, that's what you need to do in engineering. You need to have the entirely pure theoretical foundation where you begin to engineer things.
His friends, and I've watched them run companies, and the good ones know everything.
You don't think a software engineer doesn't know about electrons tunneling through transistors when the nanometers distance between them is less than 10? Of course.
Engineers as friends, and I've watched them run companies, and the good ones know everything about how their enterprises operate, and they pay attention to every detail. And Musk is definitely one of those people. And
Absolutely.
we know that because
We do,
he's
'cause
done
he's so goddamn
5
smart.
impossible things at least. And then he bought Twitter and he cut its staff by 75% and made it work better, despite
love
the
that
fact
one.
that his advertising base collapsed. And he did that despite the fact as well that everyone thought it was a mad move, economically and practically. And so I think it's great that Musk and his team of brilliant young engineers are going through the budget line by line, trying to figure out where all the idiot money goes. And I think the left is appalled by that because they've set up an entire network of so-called non-governmental agencies, organizations, NGOs, that are essentially funded by taxpayer money that run their quasi-criminal radical enterprises all around the world. And now the gravy train has ceased to operate. And so it's not surprising they're unhappy about that. But thank God for that as far as I'm concerned, especially given the catastrophic levels of debt that the American government, Western governments everywhere are carrying, is absolutely necessary. And for some reason, the left is skeptical of big business because they don't trust capitalists, even though capitalists have made the world wealthy and almost eradicated absolute poverty all around the world.
Thank you,
especially
capitalism.
since
Yes.
the Berlin Wall fell.
True.
They've done that far more cleanly than socialist or communist governments.
We're definitely
everywhere
talking
by
about
a huge
socialism and
amount.
communism right now.
Apparently, the radicals think
You don't support Donald Trump? What are you, a socialist? Holy shit! I might be a Trump supporter now. What a great argument! I didn't even think about that.
that big government is trustworthy, even though big is the problem. And they believe that because
They're
good
idiots.
thinking moralists like themselves are in charge and have the wisdom and the intelligence, and this is also what Carney believes fervently, to believe that they could operate by central planning principles and make the world a much better place.
True.
And we know what happens when that happens, Piers.
Nazis.
We know what's happened to Germany, where energy prices are 5 times what they should be, and they cause more pollution than they did 10 years ago before these idiot
And it's because
green policies
Germans
were put in
are
place.
socialists.
Then there's you characters in the UK, and you guys can't even make steel anymore. And if you think that's progress, well, then you deserve the poverty that's coming down the pipes at you very, very rapidly. And there's no evidence whatsoever that any of these policies have produced even the tiniest transformation in levels of carbon dioxide output, not in the least, especially not with China and India thinking that the West has gone out of its mind absolutely and, making their own way forward to an industrial future. And the whole bloody climate thing is a scam from top to bottom
Come on.
anyways. And everything
Climate?
about it is a lie.
I don't even believe in
That's
climate.
a terrible thing to understand, and people don't want to understand that, and no wonder. But that doesn't mean it isn't true.
True.
So, yeah, sad.
If you've ever felt like you're being
What a
watched
god.
online, it's unfortunately because you are.
What?
Hundreds of companies, so-called data brokers, watch and record everything you do on the internet. Even if you're using incognito mode or private tabs, they can still access every purchase you make, every search you type,
I'll
and
be
much
watching
more.
you.
Your data can be sold to advertisers, government agencies, or insurance companies who could use it to charge you more. You could stand by and accept all of this, or you could reclaim your privacy, as I have done for many years with ExpressVPN.
Privacy. Imagine
The app
unironically
redirects
saying
100%
any
of your
word like
online
that
traffic
ever.
through secure
Privacy?
servers.
Really?
No data brokers and no third parties can see what you do.
Privacy?
ExpressVPN also hides your IP address, without which there is no way of tracking you and no point invading your privacy in the first place. A new feature called ID Defender is free to all US customers. ID Defender scours the internet to remove your information from the files of data brokers.
Shit.
This is the #1 rated VPN by
shit.
experts at CNET, PC World, and The Verge. And right now, you can get an extra 4 months of ExpressVPN for free. To scan the QR code that we're showing on the screen, or go to expressvpn.com/peers to get 4 extra months for free. That's expressvpn.com/peers. Now, on with the show. In relation to the way, like I said, the woke left has now turned on Elon Musk, it's purely because he flipped sides and decided to support Trump because he found he had nothing in common with the woke left. I completely agree with him. I have nothing in common with them either. But his punishment
Why is he grunting?
is that all these people who love to have be kind hashtags on their bios on social media promptly went out and started torching Tesla dealerships and attacking people in Tesla cars and so on. You know, reacting with violence
actual
against somebody for political reasons. What do you think
Just for
about
politics.
Yeah, I think that's a warning to everyone.
That's what the woke left is going to do to you.
There's tremendous false morality in the planetary savior posturing of the radical left. The anti-capitalist planetary saving posturing is we're moral agents because we're on the side of the planet.
And we can do whatever the hell we want.
There's a catastrophe coming down on us that warrants all intervention. All we have to do to be moral people is proclaim to be on the side of Mother Earth, and that justifies everything. Well, what do you mean by everything? Well, how about violence in service of your moral rectitude? Yep, looks like that's justifiable too. How about keying your neighbor's Tesla to show just what a stellar moral individual you are?
Disgusting.
What an utter Pharisee you truly are. And
Pharisee.
you can see the line between mere moral posturing in service of these putative goals, saving the planet, let's say.
Any other Pharisees in the chat?
You can see that has the proclivity to turn into violence at the drop of a hat. And here's the excuse. The world's greatest industrialist is trying to go through the budget line by line, which, by the way, is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And he's putting his own ventures at risk to do it.
So selfless.
And his reward is that the radicals decide that he's enemy number one and do everything they can, not even to undermine him, although that's happening, but to target people who've bought green vehicles from the most effective electric car manufacturer
in the world.
In the world. Yeah, and that's what? That's progressive logic. Progressive. Right? You know, Piers,
they make me
one of the
so
things I
goddamn
figured
mad.
out, there's this
What'd you figure out?
finding, you know,
What?
in the psychological literature that people become more conservative as they get older. And that's actually not the right way to read that data. The
So they
right
become
way to read
smarter
that data
and
is
better.
that progressive policy, that infantile, hedonistic, self-centered progressive policy
all true.
is nothing but the political expression of radical immaturity.
True.
And that, like, classical liberalism and classic small c conservatism is something that you have to learn how to manage painfully as you get older. And so the reason that those Marxist doctrines and the socialist, hedonistic, we're going to take care of you for the rest of your life doctrines don't go away despite all the evidence that they're pathological to the core is because they are really nothing but the political expression of radical immaturity. And so that's a much better way of looking at it psychologically, because otherwise it's a mystery. Like, why do these ideas never go away despite the fact that they've been demonstrated time and time again to be utterly counterproductive? Why does Eastern Europe think that the West has lost its mind turning to these policies that destroyed them for 70 years? Well, the answer is that...
I'm sorry. Eastern Europe is looking to the West as failures? Why don't you just say Russia? Hello? Say Russia, please. I'm sorry, where are all these Eastern European countries like, man, capitalism, liberalism, that shit sucks, bro. That shit sucks. What?
that if you haven't grown up, you look to progressive hedonism as the expression of your failure to develop. And that's what we're seeing playing out in the West. It's probably a pathology of wealth, you know, because it's easy to be
wealthy and stupid,
over-coddled and turn to irresponsible hedonism and to presume that that's the appropriate political stance. And the leftists, well, and we can see where that leads. And
sorry. He meant because the West is turning to socialism. My bad. I forgot that. My bad. I get confused sometimes. I forget. Socialism to him is every time the government does anything. My bad.
And I think the Tesla example is a great one. It's like the border between that holier than thou radicalism and the idiot violence that's actually merely targeting people who bought a Tesla. There's no line at all. And we should pay very, very careful attention to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let's just change subject slightly to this Netflix drama phenomenon, adolescence, which is really in your wheelhouse, I think, Jordan.
I feel like I miss so much culture because I just don't have Netflix. Like, people talk about, have you guys heard about this new, the autism thing? The autism TV show? I feel like I've had like 3 people recommend me this.
Because it follows a 13-year-old boy who's suspected of killing a young girl. And he's been adversely influenced, affected by what he's seen online, some pretty extreme stuff.
The dating one, yeah.
Misogyny. He's portrayed as a young incel and so on. There's now a move to have this series shown in schools. It's been a huge hit in the UK and America and everywhere else. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but you've probably seen the coverage of it. What do you make of the fact, A, that it's been so successful, and B, the premise behind it, that we're basically having an epidemic at the moment
love on the
of young
spectrum, yeah.
boys in particular, whose brains are getting scrambled by pretty vile stuff online?
Well, look, there is a crisis of youth, both among young men and young women, and with young men, it's a consequence of the fact that they've been programmatically demoralized for 60 years, I would say. Their play preferences in schools are not favored because boys tend to be more active, as they're taught that competition is wrong by utter fools who don't understand that peaceful competition in game-like settings is actually an advanced form of cooperation that socializes aggression. They've been taught that their ambition is nothing but a manifestation of the oppressive patriarchy. They've been taught that all of their attraction towards women is to be regarded with extreme skepticism because fundamentally they're nothing but, would-be rapists. And, that all has an effect. And I've seen that, and it's been painful to see. I've been struck to the core over the last 6 years as my influence has grown to see just exactly the scope of demoralization among young people. I'll talk about men first, all around the world. And also, Piers, hurt as well by the observation that many of these young men can be set right with not much more than some truly encouraging words. And that exaggerates the pain because the problem is deep and the solution isn't that complex or difficult, and you don't need that much of it. And so, I warned back in 2016 about this assault
Bill
on
C-16
masculinity.
and how everybody would be locked up for misgendering somebody.
You're going to find out you think strong men are a problem. You wait till you produce weak
strong,
men
evil
who
men
are resentful and bitter because of their failure, and you're going to see real trouble. And you're going to see people turn, and this is happening to some degree because one of the most popular influencers in the world among young men is Andrew Tate.
Oh my God.
And I wouldn't hold out much hope for the West if Andrew Tate is the direction that young men go in, because he's a bad actor right to the core. But the thing about someone like him is that if you're weak and dependent and demoralized by your culture, let's say, and you've fallen into that isolated trap, someone blustery and successful on the surface and aggressive, and dominating in the power-mad way that Andrew Tate is going to look pretty damn attractive compared to your infantile dependency. And the other thing about that, Piers, is there's some truth in it, because it's actually better to be a bit of a monster than a complete bloody lamb and, a passive lamb.
True.
And this is why there's, I'll give you an example.
Guys.
So in The Lord of the Rings, for example, when the Hobbit, Bilbo, decides that he's going to stop being, hyper protected, the first thing he has to do is join this band of miscreants and become a bit of a thief. There's a bit of a darkness that has to be incorporated into men before they can mature, before they can stop being children. And there's different pathways that can take. And it can take that blustery, quasi-psychopathic route that characterizes people like Andrew Tate, you know, and the hyper masculinity that goes along with that, or it can be truly civilized and socialized so that men can become civilized and staunch competitors who are moving forward implacably in the world. That's much more complicated to manage, right? Because that's the true path of civilization.
Wow.
The self-sacrificial path of true civilization.
True.
An alternative to mere utilization, let's say, of power or degeneration into hedonism. But we've decided in our culture that we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that everything about the patriarchy is pathological, and the consequence of that is that we're demoralizing young men. Now, that also turns out to be very bad for young women, because they might even be in worse shape than young men.
True.
And so you get a show like Adolescence, and it does target in some way one element of the problem, although it's ill-formed in its psychological analysis, and there are much greater threats, let's say, to the integrity of British culture, as Kemi Badenoch pointed out this week, than what violent incel culture, of which really, Piers, there's pretty much none. Like, I'm not saying that that isn't a lurking psychological danger, and I think the Andrew Tate phenomenon points to that. But you guys in the UK, and maybe everyone in the West more broadly, we have more serious things to consider than, you know, conspiratorial incels. You know, I mean, even, let's take the Muslim extremist front, shall we?
Ooh,
I mean, even
edgy.
Countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia have been insistently warning the West that the true danger from Islamism is going to come from Europe and the UK in the future, and not from places like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, which have already become alert to the threat. You know, and for those who, you know, might want to call me racist for pointing such things out, it's like, well, the UAE and the Saudis, you know, they know what they're talking about when it comes to such things.
True.
And so we could dispense with that right away. And Kemi Badenoch, I would say, put her finger on the true problem, or at least one of the true problems. Keir Starmer, he's just playing that typical leftist game, you know, that it's toxic young masculinity, and particularly of the Caucasian version, which is really quite the insane claim. That's the thing that young people should be taught more about, because obviously they're not demoralized enough yet. So
True.
that's what I think of Adolescence. Jesus,
Thanks.
talk about putting the cart before the horse. And it's exactly what you'd expect from the progressive playbook. It's like, we're going to double down on the incels. Well, why don't you give some thought to trying to figure out why they're so bloody isolated, why young men and women are so isolated from one another now that they don't even date.
Or that.
They don't drive. They don't drink. They don't go out. They don't date. They don't marry. Why is that? Well, how about 60 years of radically demoralizing, quasi-feminist, dimwit, hedonistic, leftist propaganda shoveled at them from grade 1 all the way through university.
Fucking A.
And of course they're going to turn to figures like Andrew Tate in their desperation. But, you know, you might as well do a causal analysis and try to figure out why they're so bloody demoralized to begin with. And I would say I actually know something about that, because I think
I've bloody demoralized.
Talked to more demoralized young people in the last 10 years than anybody on the planet. And I've watched and seen what works. And more demoralization is not the answer, you know. And there's something remarkable about well-socialized masculinity, you know.
It's not funny.
One of the things I learned, for example, when I was writing my last book, one of the things I analyzed was the symbolic use of the figure of the shepherd in the biblical corpus, right? Because the shepherd figures large both in the Old Testament and in the New. And the reason for that is because a shepherd is a very good symbol of well-socialized, ordinary masculinity. So shepherds in the ancient Middle East had to live by their own wits, right, in the wilderness. And so they were tough guys, and they had to keep the wolves and the lions at bay with pretty primitive weapons, as exemplified in the story of Moses and in the story of David, for example. But at the same time, they had to protect the most vulnerable, right? And lamb is a pretty good example of, you know.
Can I just say, just real quick, like, the reason why I don't take anything this fucking loser says seriously at all is, like, how are you going to sit here and go off on all of this bullshit about, like, how to tell young men how to be real men and the fears of horrible people like Andrew Tate, and then be, like, Trump's #1 fucking fanboy? Give me a fucking break. He's so ideologically captured. It makes it impossible to take anything he says seriously, even when he might be saying something that would be otherwise good advice.
Something vulnerable and edible, especially by monsters. And so
Not
the
monsters.
model for masculinity, the biblical model for masculinity, at least in part, is tough enough to keep the bloody wolves and the lions at bay, and what would you say, resourceful enough to survive on your own, and then devoted to caring for the most vulnerable. You know, and that's a pretty damn good model, and it's certainly exemplified, well, of course, by the figure of Christ in the New Testament, who's meta-shepherd, you might say, and capable of keeping the worst evils at bay while simultaneously serving the most alienated and vulnerable. Wow. And that's the right model for masculinity. And if you don't think that exists, well, you're definitely part of the problem and not part of the solution. And
thank you.
Maybe you're a woman who's been damaged by men who've entered into your life who are radically immature or mad users of power. And that's really sad. And there's plenty of that too. But that doesn't mean that at its core, there's something pathological about masculinity. And it certainly doesn't mean that the radical leftist proclivity to describe everything
is Piers
as an
just here to listen to this guy
patriarchy
forever?
and to make
He doesn't
men
say
weak
anything?
is doing anything other than hurting young people right to the core. And Starmer's posturing with regards to adolescence is only going to make that worse.
Fucking A.
It's bad psychology, and it's not only that, it's also oriented not to help young people, but to make Mr. Starmer feel a hell of a lot more secure in the idiot presumptions of his dimwit progressivism.
Wow.
So, and that's really the fundamental aim. It's like, how can we show we're right? And if we have to burn some young people on the pyre to make sure that our moral presuppositions can remain intact, and
like, how can you say
faith
this
in our idiocy
and
remains
support
unchallenged,
Trump? Really?
then we might as well teach kids using a Netflix series on adolescence.
Base.
Jesus. Brutal. Pathetic. To the core. This terrible moral posturing.
Keep going, dude.
You know, that's, I think,
there we
the
go.
most
Still going.
pathological element of our age.
Oh, man.
You know, how can we garner as much undeserved moral credit as we possibly can? Well, we'll stand
he's off
up
again,
against
off to the
toxic
races again.
masculinity, and we'll worship the planet.
Okay.
You know,
Oh,
God,
wait.
it's so appalling. So destructive.
Hold on, wait.
And the evidence is
here
also
we go.
in
Okay,
Piers. It's like, look at Germany, for God's sake.
For God's
what
sake.
a mess. And you guys in the UK, you're not much better. And we're walking down the same road in Canada. So,
Like, this guy is a psychologist. He does all this. He did coaching or training or whatever for individuals. How do you have such a lack of self-awareness to ramble and yap for this long? This is love on the spectrum right here. What the fuck, bro?
Eastern Europe as a whole.
Oh, there we go.
I've gone through Eastern Europe.
Another one. There he goes.
Many times now. Talked to many Eastern Europeans there, and they're appalled at what's happening in the West, and they're rightly so. It's all part of the same mess that Starmer's still pushing. You know, race to the bottom. Christ.
Wait. Are we almost done? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jordan, I'm always struck by how
struck
emotional you get when you talk specifically, and this has happened a few times when I talk to you. I think when your mind takes you specifically to young men who've come and told you what they've been going through.
What?
And it's almost like you've become a surrogate dad to just, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of young men who, for whatever reason, have been lost and feel abandoned and feel confused and don't have anyone to try and steer them to, you know, some better place. Why does it affect you so emotionally, that?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Piers, before my public presence emerged, let's say, or developed, I worked as a clinical psychologist, and that was pretty intense. You know, I spent about 13 hours a week, maybe more than that, listening to people at a very deep level. I really liked that. It was unbelievably interesting. You know, it was like one Dostoevskian novel after another, hour by hour. And
Wow.
I really learned to listen. You know, and people are so fascinating if you listen to them and they actually start to tell you what they think. You know, they're unbearably interesting. It's just partly why people keep the conversations at a shallow, you know, and polite level. And it's not surprising. But I like to go deeper than that. And that was kind of bounded when I was doing my clinical practice. You know, it was a set number of hours a week. And I had many other things to occupy myself with. But then when the work I was doing started to explode, I was in contact with thousands of people, not
Thousands.
individuals, and they talked to me, and I could see this demoralization,
I'm
you know,
sorry.
and it's part of
I'm sorry.
fatherlessness, broadly speaking, and sometimes specifically. And I could see the pathway to rectifying that. Like the pathway to rectifying that, as far as I've been able to understand, and I've understood this more deeply as the years have gone by, is that we're built for adventure, Piers, and you take on adventure by taking on maximal responsibility, and that's the symbol of hoisting your cross voluntarily and trudging up the hill, right? And that's the symbol upon which our society is founded. And the adventure of life justifies its suffering, and it's maximized with maximal responsibility. And it's maximized with truth, because if you tell the truth, what should happen as a consequence of the truth makes itself manifest in the world.
True.
And that's the best possible outcome. But it's also the most adventurous thing that you can do, the most exciting thing you can do, hands down. There's nothing that compares to it. That pathway of maximal responsibility, voluntary responsibility, and truth. And I understand that deeply at a religious level. I understand that that's the symbolic world on which our productive and peaceful culture was properly founded. And I've seen the effect of communicating that to people, thousands of people. And it's a great
What the fuck are we talking
privilege
about?
to serve that role, but it's also overwhelming. You know, I think it is one of the things that made me, I was ill for quite a long time. And I think that that was part of the reason, just seeing this, like this malaise so deep, and that's also so easily addressed in a sense. You know, it's that paradoxical combination of depth of suffering and ease of rectification, you know, and I kind of understood what the conservatives have done wrong all along. You know, they tend to moralize in a finger-wagging way. You know, you should do this, you should do that. And there's truth in that, you know, that imposition of mature structure on immature hedonism and disunion and disorientation. But it's much better to talk to young people about morality and truth as an adventure than as a moral burden, as something that enlightens and offers opportunity, which it absolutely 100% does. I've had so many young men come to me. I don't know how many.
What the fuck are we doing?
There's thousands of them. Like it's continual. Who say, you know, I was completely disoriented and lost 5 years ago. You know, I started putting my world in order a little bit, making my bed, you know, in that cliched way. At least it's a gesture in the right bloody direction, trying to tell the truth, because now I understand that that's necessary. trying to act responsibly, and like my life is completely turned around. And you know, these are guys who are usually standing up straight, and they have a girlfriend, and maybe they have a baby, and maybe they're married, and you know, they were bloody suicidal wrecks 5 years ago. And so, you know, great. And as I've delved into that, you know, I've started to understand more deeply why this works. And it does work because this pattern of voluntary self-sacrifice, that service to the truth, service to your wife, to your kids, to the future, to your community, all of that is what makes your life rich and meaningful.
That's crazy.
Because your self-regard and the significance of your existence is obviously proportional to the burden that you're willing to uphold. You know, and that's the symbol that underlies Western culture. And I'm trying to teach people what that means, you know. The alternative is something like power and compulsion, or this idiot hedonism that, you know, certainly does no one any good. And, well, it's overwhelming, I suppose. The magnitude of it, I suppose, is what's overwhelming. But also that paradoxical juxtaposition of depth of suffering and relative ease of rectification.
Jesus Christ.
You know, these things are so obvious when you lay them out.
So
it's like,
obvious.
who do you admire? You admire some power-mad hedonist?
Like
that
Trump?
would be Andrew Tate.
Oh.
Or do you admire
But not
someone
Donald
who's
Trump.
taken on some responsibility? Like your natural proclivity in a healthy psyche is is to admire the shepherd, let's say, you know, and not the goddamn tyrant.
Yeah.
And not the hedonist who lives for the immediate pleasure, driven by his whims.
The immediate.
No one. It's hard for me to imagine that to understand how we've forgotten these things.
I legit don't understand how emotional and intellectual people like Jordan B. Peterson could endorse a disgusting immoral fuck like Trump. It makes no sense. Well, unironically, actually, it kind of has to do a little bit with the segment that we opened the stream with, where Douglas Murray was talking about how disgusting it was that church was talking about political stuff, because some people play this game where they separate out in their mind, like, everything about their whatever personal moral beliefs they have. They think that they can separate that from every other part of their life, and they compartmentalize everything to an immoral degree, right? If you're compartmentalizing your morality, that's definitionally contradictory. Like, if you believe something is right, it should theoretically apply, you know, in all the decision-making areas of your life. If you're sitting here saying that, you know, I think it'd be good to help other people, and then you support a guy who, like, murders people, whatever, people are going to look at you like, well, hold on, what do you mean by that? So to have, it's just so funny because Andrew Tate mirrors Donald Trump in so many different ways. And it should be obvious because all the same people that love Andrew Tate are all the same people that love Donald Trump. And all the same people that love Donald Trump are all the same people that love Andrew Tate. So how, like, what's going on here it's just like a total disconnect. That's what it is. It's just, but he's also like being very, what would you say, gratuitous? Like, he could say this more succinctly. Like, this is just, he loves to hear himself speak. And he's not trying to say something profound here. He's in love with himself. He likes to hear himself yap. He thinks he's saying something profound, and he wants to go on and on and on and on and on. Nobody who's an effective communicator or speaker, as he should be at this point, it's literally his fucking job, should ever be yapping and rambling this month with so little direction in what he's saying. This guy's like yapped for like 20 minutes. It's insane.
I guess that's part of the religious, what would you say, the degeneration of the religious substrate in the West. We've forgotten what our symbols mean. And the thing is, Piers, they mean something. You know, this is something I've really figured out.
He's being grandiose? No, he's not being grandiose. He's being, is it gratuitous? Or grandiose is just like large speaking, but it's more than that. He's rambling. He's being like excessively verbose, or he's being self-gratifying in expression. It's more. He's not just being. It's cringe. That's what he is being. It's being cringe. Okay.
We put the crucifix, for example, at the center of our churches. And
like, bro, what are we talking about right now? Oh my God.
Of our towns, particularly, that's a European thing. And the reason for that is because we long ago understood that the proper foundation of the world is voluntary self-sacrifice upward. And that's true. It's absolutely true. And if you understand that truth, your life becomes meaningful, even in its suffering, and you set things right around you. And everyone has to remember that in the West. We have to remember that. We have to relearn that. We're going to be weak in the face of Islamism, for example. We're going to be weak in the face of progressivism and nihilism and despair. And we are already. And it's because we've forgotten the deepest things, not only the deepest things that we knew, but the very things that the best countries in the world have been founded on. And you might say, well, what do you mean by best? It's like, how about the countries that the miserable and oppressed flee to voluntarily? How's that a definition for best? And if you think that those countries existed independent of their Judeo-Christian foundation, you don't know anything. You don't know anything, and you're a danger. So.
Wow. Wait,
yeah.
Are we done?
So
Wait,
that's what I've been touring around saying,
Jordan,
for like 8 years.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I wanted to end by mentioning two things, which really, in a way, you've kind of talked about without actually specifying them. One is your tour, where you've been doing a lot of this very emotive talking, very heart-rending talking. The tour comes to Europe in May and the UK June 12th to the 19th. And you've also had the Peterson Academy, which goes from strength to strength. But both of these things, it seems to me, if you are a young man confused about life and your purpose and what it means to be a man and your masculinity, and you are being bombarded with all this negativity all the time, and you're watching adolescence and thinking, is that how everybody views young men? They could do a lot worse. In fact, I would urge them to go and watch
Peterson University
your show and to sign up to your academy, because at the very least,
thank God,
what they would be getting is a more positive expression of what it means to be a man, and a guideline to how you don't have to get sucked in to all the negativity, and you don't have to go down these paths. You can make a different choice. But a lot of them, Jordan, as you know from talking to them, they feel like they don't have anyone they can talk to. But actually, in a way, because of the medium of live shows, of YouTube in particular, where you're extremely dominant, obviously, and through the academy, they actually can, because they can do it through you. They can do it through the prism of Jordan Peterson. You are there.
Well, the Peterson Academy is a good. The Peterson Academy is a good example of that, not least because it has a very effective social media element, and we have 40,000 students and about 15,000 active users of the social media site, and it's very positive. Like, people are exchanging their visions of the future and their plans for development, and like we monitor it very carefully, Pearson. We had to toss about 10 people out of 15,000 off, because 10 people misbehaving was enough to tilt the whole thing in a pathological direction. Very interesting thing to watch. But if people are looking for a community, they can definitely find it there. And it's a community that's aiming upward, and not in a naive manner. Like, it's easy to think of morality as never doing anything wrong. But that's you want to aim to not err, fair enough. But the other side of it that's never amplified, let's say particularly by the conservatives who are, concerned about morality, is that there isn't a greater adventure than truth and responsibility. And I don't mean that in a trivial manner. It's like with the truth, for example. Why is the truth an adventure? Because if you're going to say what you believe to be true, you have to sacrifice the outcome. Right? You can't use your words instrumentally in a manipulative way. You have to say what you think is the case, and then you have to let the cards fall wherever the hell they're going to. And that can be a real mess, but it's unbelievably exciting, because you don't know what's going to happen. And we know in the West, at least we knew, that the truth is what sets you free, and that the world of proper order is founded on the truth. And there's terrible risk in that, as everyone who's tried to tell the truth under difficult circumstance comes to understand. But the payoff is that your life is so exciting if you only say what you believe to be true, that it becomes virtually unbearable. You know, and you need that too, because you need an unbearable meaning to give you strength and commitment when you're suffering deeply. And many young people are suffering deeply. They don't know where to turn. And you turn towards the truth, and you turn towards responsibility. Like, why wouldn't you want that, you know, to have someone you could care for deeply, your wife, and to be able to make sacrifices on behalf of your children and your grandchildren? All that does is extend your view way out into the future. You know, in the story of Abraham, God comes to Abraham as the voice of adventure. And he says to Abraham that he has to leave his zone of infantile comfort and move into the terrible world. And he makes him a deal. He says, if you do that, this is the covenant of Abraham.
Jesus.
This is the covenant that our civilization is founded on.
Can you believe that,
If you follow
guys?
the pathway of maximal adventure, here's what happens. You become a blessing to yourself. Your name becomes known validly among your people. You establish something of permanence. You do that in a way that brings nothing but abundance to everyone, and no one can stand in your way.
Wow.
And that's what I'm trying to tell young people, is that if you follow the proper pathway upward, then your life becomes so rich that even the suffering justifies itself. And they understand that, Piers. They understand that, and they put it into action, and they straighten out their lives. And, you know, my sense is I started doing this because I was concerned, you know, about the culture war. I was concerned about the manner in which totalitarianism emerges. But my discovery, I suppose, or presumption was that you fundamentally address that one soul at a time. It's not a political issue.
At a
and
goddamn
everybody kind of
time.
knows that the culture war is much deeper than the mere political. That's what we're trying to do with ARC too, with the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. It's like, it's not a political movement. It's a movement designed to foster individual fortitude and purpose. And that has to be put in place before the political can even operate, before the liberal dream, let's say, can make itself manifest. There's no free societies without trust, and there's no trust without responsible citizens. And that's the best way to act. And it's also the way, man, it makes you more confident, it makes you more trustworthy, it makes you a better partner, it makes you far more attractive to women, at least women with any sense. You know, they can be demented by their attraction to idiot psychopaths. And, you know, that because psychopaths are very good at gaming female confidence. But in the final analysis, women are looking for a stalwart shepherd.
After they're all
and
used
that's
up.
been true forever. And I'm trying to remind young men to be that, and young women to notice. And so, and why does that make me emotional? Well, because I've seen this breadth of suffering and the consequence of its rectification.
The consequence of its rectification.
There's a sense of desperation about it, I suppose, too, because there's so many people that are
rectified right now,
suffering.
Oh my God!
You know, and I suppose in his own way, demented way, Keir Starmer recognizes that to some degree, and that's why
back
he's
to the politics,
stumbling so foolishly towards this television series. But all of his presuppositions are wrong and shallow.
True.
And he's part of the problem and not part of the solution.
He might be the problem.
You know, the education system has been dominated by progressives for 4 generations.
Tell me, King.
Right, and it's produced a culture of infantile dependency and
God damn it.
anti-masculinity. And that's been terrible for young men, but equally terrible for young women. And
equally.
More of the same is not going to fix that.
True.
You know, and you say, well, where do we turn for a better model?
I agree.
Well, I outlined a better model. That's a better model, obviously.
They're telling me we got to go.
Everyone knows it.
They're telling me we got to. They're cutting me off.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I've got 3 sons, Jordan, who, as you know, are all massive fans of yours. I, as a parent, would much rather they take guidance from you than Andrew Tate. And that's the
Absolutely.
bottom line. And I
Yeah, well, those
wish
are the
other
two
people would
choices.
see it for what it is.
Yeah, well, it's a privilege to be of service, Piers. Seriously, like, it's so
Yeah.
rewarding that it's almost incomprehensible. It's why my wife and I keep touring, and she's got very good at this too, and has taken these things very seriously, and it's really transformed her life, especially after she just about died a couple of years ago, and she's
Jesus
put herself
Christ.
together so
Yeah.
remarkably, and has learned these things deeply, and
Good for
and
her.
is trying to provide what salutary service to young women, and we'll see how that goes. They're a hard market to reach, a hard audience to reach, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. So it's hard
No,
for
I agree.
Starmer and his crew
Jordan,
to
before
rethink their first principles.
He's not
Yep.
done. Oh,
Well, they
wait.
should talk to you. They should talk to you, in my opinion. I just to wrap up, Jordan. I've got to say, I've interviewed you many times. I think this has been our best interview. I just think the
Jesus.
way you've opened up and the way you've articulated these problems and
Just
how best they can be fixed
perfect.
is just so important for people
beautiful.
to hear. And the fact it moves you so much, to me, says it all. If you didn't genuinely care, you wouldn't get emotional talking
True.
about this stuff. Why would you? But you genuinely, passionately care that young people are put on the right pathway to adult life. And I think it's...
Now, don't you guys
as a
feel
parent,
bad
I
for
thank
being
you.
assholes?
Honestly, I do. I see the impact on my own sons when they listen to you. And I'd much rather they take their guidance from you than someone like Tate, who I think is just a chancer on the make.
Yep.
And exploiting people. I don't think you're ever that kind of person.
Never.
You're doing it because you genuinely care. And there's a massive difference.
Well, thank you, sir. It's like I said, it's a privilege to
Privilege
it's
and
a
an
privilege
honor.
to serve. Like it truly is. I can't look. Imagine this. Imagine that wherever you go in the world, people come up to you and tell you that they put themselves together and their life is much better because they've been
Yeah.
trying to put into practice what you've been suggesting. Man, you could let yourself dream, and you could dream of what you would want if you had sense, and you could have anything. And that's what you'd pick. And that's the consequence of putting yourself in service. Like, really, that's the consequence of serving the truth and putting yourself in service. And
True.
anything hedonistic, anything that might accrue to you as a consequence of power, they're not even in the same universe.
True.
If you have the pearl of great price, you don't need any other treasure.
True. That was so deep.
Completely agree. Jordan, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much again for joining me again on Uncensored. I love talking to you. I feel like as we get to know each other better, you open up to me more and more, and I feel very privileged to listen to you. So thank you very much.
Me too.
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I'm also very thankful for the fact that you've treated me so straightly and with no tricks and no games, and that we communicate. Like, that's rare, especially, there's a legacy media element to what you're doing,
Yeah,
but
not the legacy
you're never
media.
playing tricks with me, and that's much appreciated and definitely noticed. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Jordan. Great to talk
Maybe
to you.
we'll see you in the UK, hey?
Yeah, I'll take you for dinner. We share a love of the same Italian restaurant. I shall take you there. You will be my guest.
All right. Good to see you, Piers. And yep,
to see you
thanks
too.
again.
Great to see you, Jordan. All the very best. Thank you very much. Piers Morgan Uncensored is proudly independent. The only boss around here is me. If you enjoy our show, we ask for only one simple thing.
One
Hit
thing,
subscribe on
guys.
YouTube and follow Piers Morgan Uncensored
Smash
on
that
Spotify and
subber
Apple Podcasts.
button.
And in return, we will continue our mission to inform, irritate, and entertain. And we'll do it all for free. Independent, uncensored media has never been more critical, and we couldn't do it without you.
Holy fucking Christ. Is this worth it, or do you just do the multiplier one? Because you put in 1 and you get out 4 guaranteed. Why did you make us watch that? Because he's a fucking legend. Are you fucking serious? Yeah, this is cringe. I shouldn't even be using this. God damn it. Destiny's so jealous of him. I am jealous. I've spent all day trying to craft my way off this retarded fucking planet. It's because I don't listen to Jordan Peterson enough. Who is in the wrong here? The entitlement. Damn, he's on the shoulder. What a baller. Oh, we've got a road enforcer. Oh my God. Oh, he's trying to get around. Nope, he's trying to get in. Ooh. Okay. Wait, whose fault? What are you asking me for? Whose fault is this? Wait, who linked me this? What dipshit retard linked me this? I did. Oh. Wow, the guy who's trying to drive on the shoulder. Was the other driver right in blocking him? Hell yeah, we call those road enforcers. Those are people that take the law into their own hands to stop the evil people like that guy who are trying to do no good. What if the Mercedes had an emergency? Then fucking call 911. That motherfucker didn't have an emergency. What the fuck is this, dude? Fuck this place. I don't like it. I don't like this place. I just don't like this place. But that's okay. Hold on. 4-second crafting time. Okay, that's good. You know what? No, let's just... There we go. Boom, right down here. Hell yes. Wait. Yeah, fuck it, yeah. Boom, boom. And then... Dude, I've used so many underground dudes because I don't give a fuck. Iron bacteria. This planet is a hellscape. Apparently somebody set Shapiro's house on fire. Not cool, guys. Definitely not cool. Whoever did that, you should be ashamed of yourself. Which Shapiro? The governor guy, I think, right? Okay, it's gonna go over there, and then you're gonna pick it up here, and then you're gonna put it in a chest, right? And then I'm gonna get iron like that. Wow, brilliant. Wow, this is so much more efficient. Sitting here watching this one thing working. Josh Shapiro, that one. Did you look over what happened in court today? This just in, the Trump admin says it has no updates for Judge Zenas about efforts to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Reiterates that a judge in 2019 viewed him as a member of MS-13. Does that mean they're just not going to do it? Uh-oh. They're supposed to be giving daily updates.
Account sharing's been in the spotlight recently. You guys have had like a pretty strict rule regarding that, as well as RMT in the past. Is there ever going to be any action on that front? Is that a special case?
Are you waiting for 1.0?
Do you have anything to say?
It's just nothing. I don't think I've got anything to say about this particular issue.
I figured as much. I figured I would ask, but yeah. What? Yeah. That's good luck with that.
Will you personally be banning eat? No, just kidding.
Oh, nice. No, why is he so spoilers about that?
Surely this is information they could get. Oh, the United States government 1 trillion % has the ability to bring back that guy tonight. They could bring him back in. How long is the flight? They could bring him back almost instantly. If we're not bringing him back, it's because the United States government is choosing not to. That's it. That's the only answer to that. And anybody that says anything differently is obviously a dishonest actor. That's not even a matter of contention.
Liberal, they have liberal friends, and then they go online and they are a white supremacist.
Damn.
This is Vera Papasova. She spent the last year dating far-right men in New York City for a story for Cosmopolitan magazine.
They're the most insecure men I've ever sat.
What if they don't release him to the U.S.? That question is beyond fucking retarded. What if El Salvador says no to the United States of America? That's not even a computable question.
Down with. It was really difficult to have some of these dates because they were so insecure, because they don't really know who they are and they don't know how to figure that out.
She said the men she dated got all their news and information from the so-called manosphere.
They did not listen to anything else. They're only listening to independent media.
They don't listen to
anything
else. That's the problem.
Men talking to men.
The manosphere is made up of macho podcasters and influencers.
There's no such thing as an independent female.
Most women have zero concept of like money.
Females don't have independent thought.
It's a space where UFC fighters are among those who reign supreme.
They love the UFC guys. They love the MMA guys because those guys do what they can. They're modern gladiators. They're badass.
Badass like Jake Shields, a former UFC star turned podcaster.
All right. Now I'm starting to feel nervous. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Who I met at an MMA gym in Las Vegas.
Like all great MMA pros,
Pissed.
I've never hit anyone in my life.
I'm not punching back. Hit me. No, I'm sitting right here. KO, KO, KO.
This is CNN. Do you miss being full-time pro, like in terms of?
You know, of course I miss it. To go from professional athlete, which is the highest of highs, to retirement.
And I guess the
podcast has helped. You could fall into depression if you just go from the most amazing career where you're famous and spotlights to all of a sudden you're a nobody.
Sure.
Like other
Or even worse,
podcasters in the manosphere,
retarded.
Jake
Like Mike
regularly
Shields.
hosts
Or Jake
controversial
Shields.
guests.
And I named the podcast Fighting Back. I feel like we have to fight back what we're told we're allowed to do. I just don't like to be told you're not allowed to talk to this person. Like, why can't I talk to him? I'm not saying I agree with his ideology, but I should hear what he has to say.
He does.
He's
This guy's
hosted
like an
the
actual
former
Nazi,
Grand
but-
Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Today I have a very, very special guest, Dr. David Duke. I knew you're controversial, but I had no idea how controversial.
And Thomas Russo, the leader of the white supremacist group Patriot Front.
Also, why not like the leader of the fucking Black Panthers or some like radical black separatist? Why not? Why is it always from one side? Doesn't it? Makes you think, you know?
Let's go where we disagree a little bit. Let's hit race, because you're a white-only group?
So the organization only allows people of American ethnicity, and all Americans, I believe, come from Europe. So they're white.
The true heirs of the American spirit fight on! Yeah, no, I understand and talk to these guys, but I've also not brought anyone hateful. If I do, I'm going to be really, really on top of them.
But so you saying that you haven't brought someone hateful on, right? People will say, well, you brought on the Grand Wizard of the KKK, you brought on Patriot Front.
Yeah.
And?
They're hateful.
No, I think those are excellent questions, but if people go and watch the actual interviews, I think they would be like, oh,
Wow,
this guy's
this is
not
so
near as hateful
insightful. He's not hateful at all.
But Vera says hate isn't what the men she dated were really looking for.
One of these guys brought me to a political meeting.
And did they talk about politics?
Barely. They talked about, it was a bunch of men complaining about girlfriends and wives, regurgitating Andrew Tate type of advice about how to train your girlfriend, how to train your wife to be submissive. And so this group was supposed to be a political group, but they're talking about relationship problems. And the fact that that's what most of the time was spent on, you don't need to be a neo-Nazi. You need therapy.
The appeal of Jake
Absolutely not.
This podcast speaks to a need among young men in this country that Vera says can't be ignored.
You have to incentivize someone to want to be better. You can't just say, let's make men better. The thing about these guys is their biggest support system is online, but that also is very isolating, and isolation is what breeds hatred.
Groups like Patriot Front offer community, but community based on racism and hate.
People have to really think about, do you have the capacity to talk to people that you don't agree with? Because that one nice conversation you might have might change someone's day enough to not have to seek out help in an online support group, which is actually a bunch of white supremacists using political beliefs as an excuse for how they feel.
She kind of sounds like a hater. Just saying. Good thing we don't do that in DGG.
I mean, but who's right, who's wrong in this scenario, and that treats some this way. I have to.
And you're like, then you're like, oh my god, you did do it. Oh, you fucking dishonest fuck.
Ooh.
I know your girlfriend's a tranny, but calm down, okay?
Oh my god! How did I just get to the most heated moment? Oh my god! Whoa! Whoa!
There's no problem. Get the fuck off my live, dude. You get the fuck off my live. Don't use slurs like that on my live. Anyone who says slurs gets kicked off my live, Elazar. You got dog walked on religion. You didn't want to debate religion. You for the entire you fucking ask me questions about random shit. We didn't even talk about politics yet. We didn't even get into politics, but I'd let you ask me random questions.
Damn.
Literally random questions. And also, by the way, you referring to someone as like someone's girlfriend being trans as an insult shows exactly right how fucking insecure you are as a man. It's actually disgusting. Absolutely fucking disgusting. Right? Like, you have to, like, literally, instead of addressing any of the arguments I brought up, like, literally just be like, oh, you are dating a trans person. Haha. Like, what? Is that like, a funny thing to you? Is that, like, a joke to you? Was that an own? As a Christian, you did that? Is that loving thy neighbor?
It's the topic of the biggest person. I don't know, but I don't think I'm going to be debating this guy. I don't think so.
Wait, I can't bring up Christianity because you're not good at justifying your position. My bad. Unbelievable.
Unreal, guys.
Unfucking believable. Actually ridiculous, dude. Jeremy, thank you so much. I really appreciate the $20. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's actually ridiculous. Positively, thank you for the $5. Thank you. And then Nicole, thank you for the $50. Thank you so much for asking him about his charges for stalking his ex. Wait, hold up. Hey, wait, did you stalk your ex?
Uh-oh.
Elazar, did you stalk your ex? Do you have charges for stalking your ex?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, do you have charges for stalking?
They probably, well, what they do actually, no, I don't have any charges. What they do is they look up my name, they look up records, they find a lot of Eliezer Perez's, and then they you can go look at it. I don't even know who they're talking about, but I don't have any charges.
Okay, but like before I kick you again, like you.
No, dude, you're already a crying bitch, dude.
It's incredibly fucked up.
Shut up, dude.
It is incredibly fucked up for you to do that, right? And as a Christian, you shouldn't be doing that. This is not Christian ethics. No Christian in this Christian in this live. Are you good? This is not Omar Navarro. No, this is Elazar. He was on Jubilee versus Sam Cedar. Yeah, leave the live.
He said leave the live.
He ran away, chat. I think it's incredibly disingenuous the way that he argues. I literally let him argue against my position and ask as many questions as he could for like an hour. And he seriously couldn't provide a good argument. He tried his hardest, but he couldn't do it. He wouldn't even let me critique his worldview. Like whenever I tried to critique him, I was changing the topic. All right, like that's hilarious. That's actually hilarious. I know he wasted so much time. I'm sorry, chat. I genuinely thought we would have been able to get into some of the Trump debates and stuff like that, but he
didn't want to do shit. He was just a pussy ass bitch.
I thought it would be genuinely like more serious than that. But he just like uses a fucking slur.
Not the slurs.
Yo, what's up? How old are you? How old are you?
Wait, did he bring him back? Does he keep kicking him and bring him back?
All right, they aren't there anymore. All right, everyone, make sure to like the stream, everyone. It does help send it out to more people. I won't be on live as much tonight because I was literally busy at the AOC and Bernie rally. Like all day, everyone. I feel horrible because I didn't get that much time on live today.
You got me addicted to House MD? Because it's the best show ever.
I feel really bad.
Hello?
I really wish I got more time on live. I think I can go 30 more minutes max, chat. Also, my videos, you know, not doing very well today, chat.
Oh no.
It's not doing very well. I think it's because I'm posting them so late. But yeah, how was the rally? The rally was all right. It was pretty good. I saw Hassan for like a second. He shook my hand and that's it. Like, let me see the video. Yeah, Elazar, crazy. I just saw your message, Jaden. I literally didn't even see that until now.
Wow, what did he say? I bet it was bad. What was it? Oh, don't even tell us.
Quick. Can we get some? Yes, W for trans women. Absolutely.
W's in chat.
Oh, there's me.
Wait, oh no.
It's literally.
What happened?
Like I said, Bernie Sanders rally tomorrow. Bernie Sanders AOC rally tomorrow in Los Angeles. I'll be there. Maybe I'll see some of y'all there. And I'll do my regular stream at first, obviously, and then we'll go to Bernard's. We'll go to Bernard's rally. I won't be able to do a sit-down interview with them this time because they're fucking slammed. But I love you all, and I will see you tomorrow. And free Palestine. Peace, everybody. Like I said, Bernie Sanders rally tomorrow.
Free Palestine.
Sanders rally.
We have 50,000 people watching. That's good for you, right? I don't know what the numbers are. I mean, it's pretty good. Well, I'd love to stay in touch and find out other ways for absolutely to grow your empire here. Well, I want to. Also, by the way, we're live right now. But we're still live. I want to do a longer sit-down conversation with Bernie whenever time permits. Hopefully soon. That'd be great. All right. Are you streaming all the time? You're always streaming? I'm never not streaming. Well, Only when I'm not only when I'm traveling am I not streaming. But yeah. All right, perfect. Nice. We have 50,000 people watching. That's good for you, right? I don't know what the numbers are with it.
Right.
Play tomorrow. Bernie Sanders.
Discussion.
He'll get him next time.
See rally tomorrow in Los Angeles. I'll be.
He'll get him next time. Don't worry, guys. Shouldn't have gave Bernie that train. True, he didn't appreciate the train. Tomorrow we'll get off this fucking godforsaken planet, okay? Would you have AOC on anything else? What do I have AOC on? I don't know, you know, I'd have to really think about that one, you know?
Perfect disqualifies you completely. This is personal too, by the way. I've spoken out strongly in favor of an independent Palestinian state, against Israeli settlements, against Benjamin Netanyahu. But I've also said I don't support the BDS movement. I don't support calling for the elimination of Israel. I don't support those things, but I support all the other stuff I just mentioned. You all know I've had people say I'm not part of the real left. I'm actually a right-winger with my beliefs. I've been excluded by people whose views I mostly share because I only signed off on 92%, not 100% of what they believe. So why does this happen? This is the critical part. I just finished reading the book The Status Game by Will Storr. And in the book, he explains that a lot of this behavior is about how people
posted this on his
try to gain
Instagram too.
status in their communities. And in many left-wing spaces, the way to earn status is by being morally pure. This is where the phrase purity test comes from. By proving you're the most principled, you're the most correct, you're the most uncompromising, you're the most left-wing. And Storr leans on the work of Jason Manning and Bradley Campbell, who describe a shift in what they call a victimhood culture. In that culture, status comes from being seen as a victim or defending victims more strongly than anybody else does. And when that's the game, what you end up with is people constantly calling each other out, not just to make things better, but to prove their own virtue, to win points, because they are the ones doing the calling out. So what ends up is that instead of building coalitions, the left ends up policing its own ranks.
At the same time, we have to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. We have to eliminate people on, for example, on Medicaid who are not actually eligible to be there. Able-bodied workers, for example, young men who should never be on the program at all. When you have people on the program that are draining the resources, it takes it away from the people that are actually needing it the most and are intended to receive it. You're talking about young single mothers, down on their fortunes at a moment. The people with real disabilities, the elderly, and we've got to protect and preserve that program, so we're going to preserve the integrity of it in this process. We have lots of categories of areas where the government is too large, it does too many things, and the Doge efforts and others have highlighted that for the American people. So in this process, you're going to see in 11 different committees of jurisdiction across the House, members work.
Ethan Klein says, Hassan Nuke Part 2 coming. Oh boy. Four out of 5 Americans want more manufacturing, but 4 out of 5 think something other than manufacturing is best for them. Maybe 1/5 of Americans can work all the manufacturing jobs that 4 out of 5 Americans want. That sounds like it works.
The interesting thing that we could all acknowledge is that me and him debating would have been way more vicious on both ends on any other platform. It was only because it was on Rogan that we're both. So the whole time, both of us want to be going more vicious than we are, but we're both kind of holding back, which just made for a strange and kind of funny dynamic to the debate. I know that what Rogan wanted was to have like a civil exchange of ideas.
Wow, he would have been so much more vicious. Jesus.
It wasn't. That's because the Democratic Party has been infiltrated with high interests and high dollar, like Wall Street money interests.
Not like Trump's party, not like his cabinet of literal, like 6+ billionaires, and not the actual crypto schemes and frauds, the largest ones in the world that he's perpetrating, by the way.
That have hoodwinked an entire generation of narcissistic millennials and young people that are addicted to SSRIs and diagnosing themselves with mental disorders.
And
that
trans.
Probably
Don't forget
half
that one.
of them they actually do have. They have figured out a way that they can hack these people's psychology into making them vote for Wall Street. That's the reason why. That's what's happened.
Wow.
I'm interested in your take when it comes to politics and the economy on Donald Trump. Trump has been all over the media saying...
Secretary of Treasury is a formal global macro hedge fund owner. With Soros, right? Wasn't it? Literally? Present, caper, elder, Roman, Logan, swipe, pocket, typewriter, goose, sans, absent, pinch, late, gothic, nick, and excused. The last word of a font. Or something. Okay. Oh, how you can be in class late, absent, excused, or present. Stealing stuff, you can swipe it, pinch it, pocket it. Caper? Oh, nick. You can nick it. Whew, careful. Goose, elder, caper, and Logan. I don't think I know a single one of those. I've heard of elderberry, caperberry, gooseberry, and Loganberry. What? They're just making shit up over here, dude. Okay. I love you. Be careful. Stay safe. Okay. Don't die. It's 9 o'clock. Don't deny it. Be careful.